Thank you very much for that warm introduction. Thank you for inviting me here to speak. I really appreciate the time here. Really, this is my first time in Lạng. Really appreciated being able to hear the history of where I am, some information about the context for where I am, and I'm really excited to hear about how all of that is being incorporated into the education here for the students with STEM. One of the things that I talk about quite often is that learning is an active process. We learn by doing, but secondly, learning is also a social process. So being able to incorporate things around the student's background, about their history, about their heritage into the STEM education itself is a very powerful means to be able to do that. So it's great seeing how STEM is being implemented in Vietnam. It's also great to see the philosophy behind it and to be able to understand that because I believe it's a very effective way to be able to do that. So thank you for that. Thank you for all the hospitality I've seen today. I've been asked to speak about the VEX ecosystem. Oh, slide didn't change. I was saying I've been asked to speak about our VEX ecosystem and how we are currently teaching artificial intelligence and our philosophy around artificial intelligence with VEX. Just a little bit about me first. Again, I'm the Vice President of Global Educational Strategy for VEX Robotics, but I'm also a teacher of 20 years. So I taught for 20 years in a classroom right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the United States, and where I'm from. And I came to teaching STEM, and I came to the position that I'm in right now with absolutely no background in computer science or engineering or anything else like that. And I always say that because I feel like that's very important to share with educators, that you do not have to be very well immersed in engineering or STEM or computer science or coding for that matter to introduce this to your students or to your school. All that you have to do is be passionate about your students and be passionate about learning and teaching. If you do that, you will be successful. So I think everyone in here is familiar with VEX, but what I like to say is VEX Robotics is the world leaders in trying to create meaningful learning experiences for students. That's what we try to do. We try to provide meaning and engagement and honestly fun for our students all over the world. VEX got its start in robotics competitions. Our two founders, Tony Norman and Bob Minlich, were both working together at the Department of Defense, and they started mentoring a high school robotics team in Tony's garage about 20 years ago. They enjoyed that so much, they decided to start a robotics company around it, and now we host the world's largest robotics competition. So this past April and May, we had around 30,000 students from over 100 different countries descend upon St. Louis, Missouri for the VEX Robotics Championships. And of course, we were very excited about the students and the teams that we had there from Vietnam. Our VEX Continuum, which we have up here today, when we talk about the VEX ecosystem, this is really what we're talking about right here. The VEX Continuum, both in STEM and then also in computer science right here. I'm going to talk about the importance of that here in a moment and talk about why we build out this platform of tools for students as young as 5 years old, all the way up for students through the university. But a couple other things that we're very proud about is, number one, this certification by CAST. So CAST is a nonprofit located in the United States. They developed the Universal Design for Learning Standards. So the whole purpose of this is how to ensure that our tools, or our robots, our curriculum, and our teacher professional development is able to be utilized by students across the learning spectrum. Okay, the reason why I feel that teaching is the most difficult job in the world is because every student learns differently. If everybody learned the same, teaching would be a lot easier, but students don't. So that's why teaching is so difficult. So there's been a lot of research, there's been a lot of studies about how to actually be able to ensure that you create products and solutions that are able to reach all of your students, no matter where they are with their learner profile, no matter where they are in their learning spectrum. And we work with CAS to be certified to ensure that we were doing that. The other thing that we're very proud of is our teacher certification system. We believe very, very, very much in investing in teachers and investing in educators. So obviously, VEX, we're a hardware company. We sell those things on that table right there. But we know that just selling those things right there will not be effective in education. You've got to be able to invest in your teachers. Teachers have to feel confident, and they have to feel empowered, and they have to feel capable of being able to deliver on these platforms. So what we like to say at VEX is we don't just create platforms or hardware, we try to develop total solutions. That's with our curriculum, and that's with things like this with our teacher professional development. And we've actually done a lot of studies to validate our teacher professional development program. We've had those studies published, and that's something that we're very proud of. Another thing that we're proud of is VEX Code VR, which I know is being utilized here in Vietnam quite extensively. Has just been adopted by the Learning Cabinet. The Learning Cabinet, guided by UNICEF, the Asian Development Bank, and some other organization, is a curated list for educators to be able to choose tools that they can then implement in their classroom. We had Andy and I participated in a very rigorous process because the whole idea behind the Learning Cabinet is they only add things there that have been vetted by them, that they are confident actually produce sound educational outcomes and actually work for both teachers and students. So we are very proud of all of that being added there. So kind of what I'm going to talk about both in terms of the VEX ecosystem and also in terms of artificial intelligence is this idea of accessibility, okay? And the idea being that when you think about accessibility first and you prioritize accessibility, it makes learning outcomes for all of your students even more effective. Probably the most powerful example that I can give for this is people that use voice to text on their phones, right? Many people use voice to text. I saw people using it today in order to be able to send a text message. That's an accessibility function that is built into your phone, but people that do not have a particular disability still use it because they find it more useful to be able to do. And that's just one example of many of thinking about accessibility first when you think about creating tools like you see up here, and you also think about creating curriculum and teacher professional development. If you think about accessibility first, it will make the learning outcomes better for all students. So what we do at VEX, when we create a new product like VEX AIM, for example, which just came out last year, we think about how would a visually impaired student operate this robot? How would a hearing impaired student be able to operate this robot? How would a student that might not have very good motor skills with their hands still be able to learn and be engaged with this particular robot? This goes back to what I talked about before. This is why we work with organizations like CAS. I'm going to talk about here in a few moments other researchers that we've worked with. But really the main thing here is this idea of prioritizing accessibility first, okay? And this is why also it's so important. We talk about the VEX ecosystem and we talk about the VEX continuum. It's oftentimes what you have in schools is teachers in schools and universities choose different coding paradigms. And you can see over there we have an icon-based coding paradigm, and as students, as they progress through their academic journey, end up in something like this, which is text-based. Same thing with physical robotics. They start with something like a bebot when they're very young, and then they get to more advanced humanoid robots at the very beginning. This is what I did when I taught, right? I pieced together different solutions to be able to utilize as my students got older and as my students kind of progressed through their learning journey. But what we know from research, and we partnered with researchers from the University of Maryland to study this, what we know from research is when you do that switching between different platforms, whether those are coding platforms or physical hardware platforms, when you do that, it comes at a cost for your students. Okay, it comes at a cost of learning for your students because those things, those platforms are not purposely built together. Whereas we purposely designed Vex Go, for example, to be a gateway to Vex IQ. And we designed Vex IQ to be a gateway to Vex V5 and Vex EXP. We designed our coding software, Vex Code, to easily progress from block-based coding to Switch, which is our trademark platform that we use to transition students from block to text-based coding, then to Python or C++. So we built all those scaffolds into our hardware and our software and our teacher professional development to make sure that when students progress from Vex 1, 2, 3 to Vex Go to Vex IQ, and no matter where they go, they do not suffer a learning loss as a result of switching between those two platforms. So this is some of the papers that we've written on this and some of the research that we've done essentially to validate this. As I mentioned to you before, we work very closely with the University of Maryland, Professor David Weintraub, at the University of Maryland, to understand what it means to actually provide a school with a continuum of STEM and computer science for its youngest students all the way through its oldest students. And then how to ensure that the curriculum supports them every single step along the way, and then also to make sure that the teacher professional development also supports them every single step along the way. So when we talk about the Vex ecosystem, this is really what we mean by that. It's creating a continuum that supports students where they are and allows students to progress at their own pace. That's the accessibility part. We have to make sure we reach students where they are and allow them to progress at their own pace as they move throughout their academic journey. You're going to hear me talk about another relationship with the university here in a moment when I begin talking about AI, but this is something that we would love to see also here in Vietnam, where you have the opportunity to use some of the fantastic universities here in Vietnam and the research to be able to study what is happening in great STEM centers like this and collaborate not just with universities here in Vietnam, but also collaborate with universities in the US. Andy and I actually participated in a study out of CMEO in which we did lessons with with teachers all throughout Southeast Asia around computational thinking and universal design for learning. So doing those partnerships with universities around research is something that we feel is very important to ensure that what we are giving our students, they have the best opportunity for educational outcome. Here are just some of those examples of scaffolds that I mentioned to you before. We're doing a lot of great things with Vex competition teams here, and when competition teams have to utilize an engineering notebook, right? This is a great example of engineering notebooks for very young students. These students here are using Vex 1, 2, 3, that robotics platform all the way over here, yes. And what these students are doing in our curriculum, they're documenting their thinking. They're reflecting on their thinking. They are showing what they did wrong, what they'd like to improve upon, and what they feel like they did right. But they're obviously doing it in a much different way than you would do it as a Vex IQ team, for example, or a V5 team, for example. But what this does is it prepares students by the time they get to Vex IQ or by the time they get to a V5 team. This is something they've done in their school setting for years. They're used to it, they know how to do it, and it becomes natural for them to be able to do. This is one of my favorite examples right here, and this is also another study that we did with Dr. Maya Israel from the University of Florida. So what you see is a student here in a wheelchair working with their teacher's aide, and they're practicing coding, just like you can see with the students that are on the floor right there. So this student in a wheelchair cannot use his hands, as you see here, normally would not be able to participate in a computer science classroom. This student would not be able to participate with his peers to be able to do this. But now he can because he's using the coder with Vex 1, 2, 3. And what the student is doing here is he's telling his aide which coder cards to put into the coder, and as a result of that, he's able to do the exact same activity as the rest of his students, as you can see sitting around him there. And that's really a wonderful and amazing thing, right? So when you talk about accessibility and we talk about the VEX ecosystem, like I talked about before, we're really serious when we say we want to make sure this works for all students, not just the top 10% of students, not just the gifted and talented students. We'll reach them too, but we want to make sure this is able to reach all students effectively. So again, we talk about accessibility, though it's not about focusing on disabilities, it's about removing barriers. So this is a great example in the previous slide of removing barriers. This is a student that cannot use a keyboard, cannot use a mouse, cannot use a computer, but this student can still learn computer science. So we're not focused on this student's disability, we're focused on removing barriers. And this is a great slide that really kind of drives that point home, okay? Oftentimes in education, you see what's going on in the middle there, where we give students props or we give students things to help them, in this case, see over the fence, but that's focusing on the disability. The real problem is removing the barriers. What we want to do is here. This third thing, we want to remove the fence. That's what we want to do. We want to remove the actual barrier in order to be successful, so that when we talk about the VEX ecosystem, we're actually able to reach all students effectively. So now the second part of my talk today, I want to talk about our approach, VEX approach to teaching AI. So AI is obviously something that's very much prevalent in our society right now. People have a lot of different opinions about what to do with it, how it should be taught. Again, what I pride ourselves on and what we've done at VEX is we've worked with researchers to be able to do that. The first person we worked with is this gentleman right here, Dr. David Tereski from Carnegie Mellon University. He's the professor of applied robotics there. He was actually the first person to ever get AIM robots. He used them in his class at Carnegie Mellon. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about our relationship with Professor Tereski in a second. But first, how do we define AI? So if we're going to talk about how we're going to teach AI, the first thing we have to do is come up with a definition of it. So I really like this definition. Artificial intelligence is a branch of computer science that's important. It's actually a part of computer science, right? Concerned with techniques that allow computers to do things that, when people do them, are considered evidence of intelligence, okay? So really important that we can kind of wrap our heads together around what AI is and what AI means. So we again partnered with the University of Florida to figure out what is the best way to teach AI. We actually just got this research published in this book right here. We have a chapter in that book talking about AI applications in primary education. So really being thoughtful about thinking about our curricular approach with the experts in the field, and just to be honest, not really kind of making it up as we go along, but really being thoughtful about it and thinking about the best ways to do that. So we had teachers from Pittsburgh, where I'm from, and also Miami-Dade Public Schools, just the third largest school district in the United States. We gave the teachers stipends for participating and gave them badges as they worked through and participated in the activity. So what we did is we worked with the teachers throughout this entire session. The first thing we did was a needs analysis. So what would you need to do in order to be able to teach AI effectively? From there, we created lessons, and then we went through the actual professional development for preparing for the implementation. Now, when I talked about Professor Tereski before, that's his AI for K-12 big ideas right there. So we work closely with him and his organization. The reason why that's important is because they're actually creating the standards for how to teach artificial intelligence. So you have those big ideas, perception, representation and reasoning, learning, natural interaction, and then societal impact. Those are the 5 big ideas. And those big ideas are then broken down into individual learning standards. So we were really happy to work with Professor Tereski and his organization to be able to utilize these standards in our lesson. And then we also combine that with what I talked about a moment before, which is universal design for learning standards. And that's important, again, because we want to think about accessibility first when we think about how to reach our students. So this is our actual curriculum approach. You can see how we created the lessons over here on the right-hand side. And this was all done with teachers. The most important thing to think about with this is this was done with teachers and the researchers really working together with us as a product company to figure out the best way to implement these lessons effectively. We focused on the big idea of perception. So at VEX, a lot of what we do is camera-based, right? So we have an AI vision sensor for our VEX IQ robot. We have one for our V5 and EXP robotic system. We have one built into VEX AIM. So a lot of what we do around teaching AI is around perception and understanding how computers and AI is able to perceive the world differently or similarly in some instances than how humans do, and how I can incorporate that logic to do some really cool things with my robot. We developed the curriculum sequence for this. A VEX robot is exploring an alien planet and have to be able to identify if there are aliens, water, unique materials. Again, really focusing on that AI idea of perception. And then we created all these activities for both VEX 1, 2, 3 and VEX Go in order to be able to implement these things effectively. So I think the main takeaways I would like to share with you here this afternoon is just that at VEX, what we're really trying to do is be thoughtful about how we're implementing our curriculum approach around the VEX ecosystem and around artificial intelligence, and we'll continue to do those things. We'll continue to collaborate with researchers and experts to be able to do these things well. And then secondly, I'm really excited again about what I've been able to see. This is my 3rd time in Vietnam, and I'm really excited about what I've been able to see here in Vietnam. The philosophy behind how you're implementing STEM, just like we try to be thoughtful behind it, that's what I see happening here, and I'm very excited about that. And I can't wait to come back in the near future and see how far we continue to progress. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. Thank you.